File management is and always will be a tricky conversation for photographers. However, it is something that we all need to have. Now, I say it's tricky because there is no single perfect method for file management that will apply to everyone. There are just so many factors to consider. How many backups do you have? How often do you update them? Where do you keep them? What kind of drives do you have? And another common one is, do you need to use a NAS? And I think you see where I am going. In this video, let's talk about 5 reasons why, as a photographer, you might want to use a NAS, and at the same time, let's check out the new UGREEN Nasync DXP4800 Plus. Now, if this isn't the first time you're watching one of my videos, then you probably know these 2 things. Number 1, my name is Nicco Valenzuela. I am a landscape and architectural photographer. And, well, I have a lot of videos about photography and all the tech behind it. And number 2 is that I actually often review a lot of products from UGREEN, which is why you're probably also not surprised that I have the new NAS from UGREEN that at the time of recording this video is still on Kickstarter. At the start of the campaign, they offered to send me this product for review, and naturally, I declined. Why did I decline? Simply because I don't consider myself an expert on these things. However, they insisted to send it to me, and I told them that, okay, maybe I can document my experience being a fairly new NAS user, and at the same time, share to my audience why I think they should be or they shouldn't be using a NAS system. And that's precisely what we're going to talk about. Let's talk about why you should or shouldn't be using a network-attached storage system. And in the process, I'll tell you also basically about the basic things of what a NAS is and how it works. For the first reason, let's talk about the most basic and the most obvious one: large capacity. In fact, it is a combined large capacity. For example, the DXP4800 Plus comes with 4 bays. Now, on each of these bays, you can, of course, attach a NAS drive. And on each of the bays, you can have 22 terabytes of drive, basically 22 terabytes of storage. And obviously, you have the option of using 1, 2, 3, or 4 at the same time. In addition to that, the DXP4800 Plus also has somewhat of a hidden door right here that you have to use screws on to be able to open. And here you can also insert 2 additional M.2 SSD drives. Each of the M.2 drives can have up to 4 terabytes of storage. So that makes our total up to 96 terabytes all in all if we max this out. 22, 22, 22, 22, and 4 and 4 at the bottom. For the SATA drives, they come in at a maximum of 22 terabytes on each one, and that is basically why it's the maximum for each bay. And of course, there are many other ways to combine multiple drives, but of course, one way is to be using a NAS. Now, when you do get one of these, take note that most of the time, they don't come with the drives installed and you would have to get them separately. So that's just something you need to know because some people actually make the mistake of thinking that when you buy the NAS, it also already comes with the drives. And of course, that's not the case because you might also want to have multiple choices with basically how many drives you use, how big each of them would have, and the configurations, which leads me to my next point. The second reason as to why you want to use a NAS for your photos is because of the options on how you can protect your data. As you begin to use multiple drives in this system, you have a wide range of options as to how your files are being managed and at the same time, how redundancy is being made. Now, if you're not familiar, redundancy might sound bad, especially if we're talking about a person playing a role. But when it comes to drives, we do want redundancy because what we want is that if ever and whenever one of the drives we're using fails, we want to have backups. We want to have redundancy so that we still have a way to access those files. Depending on how you configure your NAS, there are ways that you can make sure that even if 1 or 2 of the drives fail, you have a way to keep your files safe. For the DXP4800 Plus, you have options to use it as a basic collection of drives. You can use it as JBOD or just a bunch of drives, or you can use RAID 0, 1, 5, 6, or 10. If you're not familiar with how these RAID systems work, that's a lengthy conversation, but I will put an article that you can read down below so you can understand them better. But basically, the main point I'm trying to make is that when you use a NAS, you have options for redundancy, and basically you have options to make sure that your files are safe, even if 1 or 2 drives fail. Now, the next 3 things on this list are reasons that are specific to using a NAS. And for you to understand that better, if you're entirely new to these things, is you need to understand that this is a server. This is something where you put all the drives and all the storage and connect it to a network. Now, that network can be limited to just within the area where you put your NAS, or it can also, of course, be connected remotely or accessed remotely, depending on how you want to use the NAS to begin with. To be able to set up your NAS, you basically need 3 main components. Number 1 is the NAS itself. Number 2 is a router that will connect your NAS to the network. And the third will be the device that you'll be using to access your NAS, to download the files or to upload the files, and basically use the files when you need them. So this can be a desktop computer, this can be a laptop computer, and with this UGREEN system, you can also use a tablet or a smartphone. Now let me go through the parts of the DXP4800 real quick. Of course, we have the power button right here, and as you've already seen, we have the 4 base right here, and you press right here to be able to take out one of the drives. And here at the bottom, we have a USB 3.2 Type A port, a USB-C 3.2 port, and at the same time, an SD card slot, which means that you can attach either a portable drive, a thumb drive, or even the SD card straight from your camera to be able to back it up to these drives. Now, that's not the only way that you can upload the files or back up the files to these drives. Of course, you can also do it remotely depending on how you set up your NAS again. Now, at the back, we have the port for the power adapter. We have a reset button just in case you need it. And we have 2 LAN ports. Now, one of these is 2.5 gigabit and the other one is 10 gigabit. Plus, we also have an additional USB 3.2 Type A port right here and 2 slower USB Type A ports that you can use for peripherals. At the same time, we have an HDMI port right here because also aside from using this on a computer or on a tablet, you can also directly use this onto a display if you want to play media coming from the NAS itself. Now, my third reason is this. If you have a shared workspace such as what I have here, which is a studio that I share with 5 other people, then I can also share this storage with them through the Wi-Fi of the studio. Or alternatively, if they want faster transmission, then they can also connect their computers to the router via LAN cables. And that means that would be very easy to share files, even large files, between a team of people working in the same space or in the same network. If, for example, you're a photographer or videographer and you're working with an editor, it would be very easy to share the files without even having to stand up and hand them a drive or whatever like that. If you're working within the same network and you grant them access, you can very easily hand them over the files without physically handing them over the files. And this might even be faster than copying it onto a drive and then handing that over and then them copying it from the drive and so on and so forth. Of course, if you're working with a bigger team, then that makes it even more efficient because you all share that network and you all share that storage that is within that network. Now, one reminder I have to make is that there are so many variants of this NAS. There are 2-bay versions, there are 4-bay versions, there are 6-bay versions, and there are also all SSD versions that you can choose from. And each of those options will also have different specifications that come with them. For example, the DXP4800 Plus comes with a 12th Gen Intel Pentium Gold processor. And this also comes with 8 gigs of RAM that can be expanded up to 64 gigs. Of course, as I previously mentioned, and it's also very obvious, another difference between these variants would be the number of bays and the total capacity that it can hold. Now, reasons 4 and 5 are actually the reasons why I got convinced to start using this. And these are things that are specific to my own workflow that may be applicable to a lot of other photographers and also videographers. Number 4 is the fact that I can send my files home when I'm traveling. Now, I don't know about you, but whenever I travel, I have this anxiety that I always carry around with me that if I end up with photos that I really, really love, I'm afraid that when I go home, something bad has happened to these photos. They could either be corrupted or I lose the SD card, or even worse, I lose my gear entirely. And while the latter hasn't ever happened, I have had professional shoots wherein the files did not make it home. So I feel like if I had a way to send the files home, well, in this case, to send the files back to the studio even before I physically get there, then it would be a great way to alleviate my anxiety and at the same time make sure that my photos are safe. Now, the reason behind that is, of course, you can choose between making your NAS just local to your network or having it available remotely. If you choose the former, then you would of course have to be near your NAS or near your network to be able to access the files and at the same time to be able to put files in. However, if you choose the latter, you can access your NAS remotely, which also means that you can also upload files remotely via the internet. Now, there are two things to consider with this. Number 1 is that whenever you do this, then anyone with your UGREEN Cloud password will also have access to your NAS if you enable this feature. Now, I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but of course, you would have to keep all your guards up, including two-factor authentication, and for Pete's sake, use a really good password and username that you won't forget, but won't be easy to figure out for other people. And the second thing you need to consider is that if you're remotely accessing your NAS and if you're uploading your files remotely, then you would be at the mercy of the internet speed from where your NAS is, and at the same time also the internet speed of the location where you are uploading from. So for example, even if I have really fast internet here in the studio, the speed of how I back up my files, how I send my files home to the NAS would depend on how fast the internet is at the place where I am staying. Of course, if there's no internet there, then I also have no way to communicate with the NAS, and well, I also have no way to communicate with anyone else. So that's pretty obvious. But yes, the point is that you would have to rely on the speed of the internet where the NAS is located and where you are uploading from. And lastly, number 5 is basically the reverse of number 4. I want to have access to my files, and more importantly, I want to be able to access my files, and if I do need to send them to clients or send them to anyone else, I don't have to bring the drives with me when I'm traveling. Now, I'm really guilty of this. Whenever I travel and I have pending work or just work that I feel like my clients might need right away, in the past, what I would do is I would bring multiple SSDs, multiple portable SSDs with me, just so whenever I need them, I can just plug it into my computer and I can send them the files. Well, again, at the mercy of the internet speed of where I am. But recently, one thing I've been enjoying is traveling without a laptop. So I often leave my laptop behind unless I really do need to edit the photos right away. But if not, I'll leave it behind. I'll have my iPad with me. Now, what's actually been life-changing is that when I travel, I only bring my iPad. Now, one thing I could do is just use a portable SSD, and if ever I need to send files, then upload from the SSD to the internet through whatever service, right? And also, I could use my SD card reader and plug it into my iPad and pack it up. Now with the NAS, this is what I can do. I can get my iPad, open the UGREEN NAS app, and then if I need to back up files from my camera, all I need to do is plug in an SD card reader and then upload straight from there. Or if I have an SSD, then I can plug in the SSD and upload straight from there. However, if we're talking about the scenario about my clients needing files that I have in my NAS, I don't even need to upload anything. I can get my phone, open the app, and basically just send the files coming from the NAS directly. Now, what does that do? Number one, it allows me to have access to the files without a computer, without a laptop, and that also means I get to travel lighter, which is actually good for my back. Another thing is that, again, I can just upload the files from my iPad using a card reader and send my files home. And number three is the bigger implication that when I travel, whether for work or for leisure, I don't need to carry so many things. I have the assurance that I can keep my files safe, and at the same time, I have access to my work if ever I do need them right away. And there we go. I'm pretty sure that there are people watching this video who might have some things to add. And also, if you have some corrections with whatever I said, again, this is not coming from an expert's point of view, but just from the experience of me setting up my NAS, and at the same time, how it is affecting my work as a photographer. Now, if you have anything to add, then feel free to leave them down below in the comment section. And at the same time, if you have questions, you can also leave them down below, and I will try my best to answer them. And also, the other people in the thread can also chime in to give you more information. Now, if you do want to get a NAS and you want to learn more about the UGREEN Nasync system, then I put the link down below. And the link right there might depend on when you will be watching this video. If you're watching this video pretty close to when I uploaded it, then you will see the Kickstarter campaign right there. However, those are only available in the US and in Germany. However, if you watch this a little bit later on, then there will also be an Amazon link right there, and it will also mean that it is now more available. Now again, my name is Nicco Valenzuela. I'm a landscape and architectural photographer, and in this channel, you will see a lot of content about photography and the gear and the tech that we use. And if you're new to the channel, then you might want to click that subscribe button and hit that notification bell. In any case, thanks for watching.